Are you struggling getting started studying for the NBCOT exam? Are you wondering just how you're supposed to cover all of the material needed in a timely way? My name's Jordan, I'm a registered occupational therapist, and I'm here to help you pass your boards exam. Okay, so what I want to start with is for you to choose your materials at the very beginning of your studying and stick with those materials the whole time. So pick 2 or 3. For me, I chose 2 exactly. The first is super popular, and it is the Therapy Ed book for the NBCOT. Now, in my program, I actually had to purchase it for my final semester, so it was kind of helpful because I already had it on hand. I've heard of a couple different books that are recommended, so obviously the Therapy Ed book, and I've also heard of one called the Purple Book. I don't have experience with that, so I can't give you any advice on that, but I was successful using this guy. So I used this in conjunction with the AOTA study pack that's available on their website. It includes a ton of different practice questions, both from the NBCOT, like past exams, as well as ones that they just kind of came up with on their own. And it's nice because it includes practice questions, just regular old multiple choice, and your clinical scenario questions. It's got a ton of different ones for that as well. So those are the resources that I chose. The next step is going to be to choose your timeline. You probably already have one in mind. I know that when I was looking around at kind of how much I should study for this, I basically heard 6 to 8 weeks. I chose 6 just because I didn't have, I wasn't on a time crunch, but I also didn't want to take forever to study for it. So I thought 6 weeks was a good timeline for myself. And then once you have your timeline and your materials, get a calendar. So whether it's a planner like this, or just like a printout of a calendar, just something that you can use to write out your daily plan for what you're gonna do what day. When I was looking at setting up my calendar, I started on February 18th and counted back pretty much exactly 6 weeks from that day. When are you guys taking your exam? Let me know in the comments below so that I know what types of content you are looking for and need, and by when it would be helpful for you to have that. So now that you've chosen your materials and your timeline, I want you to take the empty calendar that you have, and you're going to sit down and write out your whole plan for the full 6 to 8 weeks that you plan to study. You're going to include 4 things in the plan. So the first is going to be days to get through all of the material, so reading through all of the chapters in the textbook. Second is going to be days to review that material, so however you take your notes, you're going to use days to review those, reading through them, doing Quizlets, whatever it is that you like to do to review. Third, days to take your practice exams, and then 4th, days to just take a break and not study. So the way that I approached my structure for studying is I dedicated 2 days per chapter to get through the material, and then after I would complete 3 chapters, I would take a day to review all of the material I had covered in those previous days from those 3 chapters. Okay, and then I would repeat that process for the full 6 weeks. Now I want to talk about considerations that I had when I was writing out my study plan. When I was considering my practice exam dates, I treated these like the real thing. So I live with my fiance and I have 2 big dogs, and it can just be a lot of distractions and a lot of noise. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to focus if they were around. So I was like, babe, you gotta take the dogs and just go for at least 3 to 4 hours so I could sit down and focus on the exam. I had a little timer on my phone that I kept looking at while I was going through the different sections of the exam and when I was taking my bathroom breaks, just so that I had a good idea of how long I needed. Now, I completed my first practice exam on my third week because I thought it would be a good way to kind of see what I needed, like where my weaknesses were and what I needed to really focus on throughout the next 3 weeks of my studying. And then the last 2 practice exams I took closer to the end, so I took them week 5 and 6. So I'll show you super quickly just an overview of the actual calendar that I used. So as you can see here, Sunday was the day that I used for my rest day, and I wrote out the number of the week that I was on, and then I dedicated each day. This is pre-assessment. I'll get into that later in the video, but you can see that I've included my days to study, and then after a certain amount of days, I would take a day to review Quizlets. Okay? And then you're going to include your days for your practice exams in there as well. What I'm going to do when I finish this video is I'm going to upload like a PDF copy of not this exact thing, but I'm going to type out a copy so that you have exactly how I studied in case you want to go and download it and use it for yourself. When it came to the day-to-day stuff that I did, what I found was helpful for me during my review days, there's a gym at my apartment complex, and so I would take my phone with Quizlet on it and go down to the gym and just use the elliptical, the treadmill, the bike, kind of whatever, for however many hours it took to get through most of the material that I was reviewing. And for me, that was really helpful because I was able to fit in both like kind of some self-care and also get through the review. Because sometimes it can be a lot for me to sit down and just read or flip through Quizlets when I'm not like occupied doing something else. And this kind of got like the juices flowing in my brain at the same time that I was looking through all the material again. So I found that to be helpful. So you've got your structure laid out for the full 6 to 8 weeks of what you want to cover each day. Now we're going to talk about how you're going to schedule your days. So we all know that it can be exhausting to study for 8 hours. I know that you probably did, just like I did in graduate school, where we would cram like the week before exams and stuff. This is a lot different than that type of exam, just because there's so much material and you really have to be able to manipulate it in your brain and think like a therapist and analyze the situation given to you. It's much different than like regurgitating the information that you have been studying for the past X amount of weeks. So you're going to stick to 4 to 6 hours a day and not longer than that to study. I started my days at 9 a.m. So I'd get up at like 7, walk my dogs, have some breakfast, maybe have some coffee or tea, and then sit down at 9 o'clock, and from 9 to noon, read and focus on reading the material and taking my notes. Then I would take a little break for lunch and come back, and from 1 to 4, I would do the same thing. And then I would set it aside and be done for the day. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-assessment that you saw briefly in my calendar. Before you start any given chapter in the book, you're going to complete a pre-assessment. So you're going to sit down and assess what parts of this chapter do I know and what parts of this chapter do I not know and really need to focus on relearning. You're going to type out the chapter, the name of the chapter at the top in Word, and then you're going to have 2 sections. The first is going to be need to study. The second is going to be need to review. Then you're going to open the chapter and you're going to type out each of these bold headers, and you're going to sort these headers into what you think you kind of know and what you think you don't know and might need to study. And that's how you're going to break them up. And you can use that to kind of structure your days, knowing what's going to take more time and what's going to take less time. And again, I decided to do this the night before I started a new chapter, but if you wanted to, honestly, you could do the entire book at the beginning of your study session. That's going to be up to you. Lastly, I want to talk about how I went through the chapters in the book, because I didn't complete them chapters 1 to 16 in that order. I actually completed them kind of based on how they fit together categorically. So the very first chapter that I read, I completed chapters 1 and 2, but those ones are kind of very, very overarching themes that you're probably not going to need to go through and study again. I believe that they're like on the structure of the exam and kind of like all about NBCOT and stuff like that. So not stuff that you're going to have to really go through again. So I'm just going to include the ones that I really studied and went through. I started with chapter 6 and then did 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 5, and then I did chapter 3, 15, and then 11, 12, 13, 10, 14, and then finally I did chapters 16 and chapter 4. So that's how I approached it. I'm going to include a link to it below so you can take a look at that and use it, manipulate it however you want. Okay, so now that you have your study plan in action, if you're wondering exactly how to take notes and how to use Quizlet to be more efficient in your studying and reviewing, then go ahead and watch the next video in this series, and I'm going to show you exactly how I take notes and utilize Quizlet to review and take it with me on the go.